everyone, it's Paul from PMD Photography, and today we are going to do some compositing in Photoshop, mainly masking and a couple extra effects, but mainly masking. What we're going to do is take this image here. This is Chris on a skateboard ramp, and we are going to turn it into this. We're going to basically mask Chris out and put this background in there, do some color grading, color matching, and add one effect of lens flare. So let me turn these off and show you what we're going to do. We are going to add a background. We're going to mask Chris. We are going to match the color. Look at that. Obviously he's colder in the background. We're going to match it. We're going to add an effect of lens flare. It's a really cool effect that's very easy to do. Show you how to do that. And we're going to color grade it. Although this is great, I wanted to have it a bit colder look and a more, this is actually a fashion photography color grade, which I like on a lot of pictures. So let's turn that off. Let's ungroup this. So what you want to do, and the process that I did this image in to get to this, was obviously the first thing you always do, Command or Control J, and duplicate your background. So first thing you want to do is mask, and that's what we're going to primarily cover in this tutorial. There are many ways to mask. There's the pen tool, there's the wand tool, all sorts of different ways, and to cover them in one tutorial is just insane. So I am going to show you what I did for this one. I'm going to hit W, which is the wand, and the quick selection tool, and this gives you a rough outline of this. Allows you to just basically here, go up here, see this little plus right there, make sure that's highlighted, and press and hold the mouse down. Basically you drag over your subject, go around it, and get a very rough outline. And you can see the marching ants are going into places that I do not want them to go. That was very quick, but you can see it's not perfect. And this is when you have to start utilizing all the different tools that Photoshop has. And I am not going to spend the time in this tutorial to mask as I did originally, because we're going to be here for a lot longer than we need to be. But if you can see from the marching ants, we want to basically mask the guitar, him, and this platform. And this Command Z is your favorite. If we could have that in life, it would be fantastic. And you want to get a general outline. I'm going to show you a trick here. Let's just say, okay, after you've done a general outline with the wand tool, which is pretty good, especially if you've got a high contrasted, and this is why it's so difficult to teach any one way to mask. You can use channels, which is another tutorial. You can do calculations, which is another tutorial. So you have to determine, this is why you got to practice, you got to determine which is the best way you want to mask. And because I have a high contrast between him and the background, this quick selection tool is the easiest, and it's perfect because it gives a pretty good outline of what I want to mask. Okay, look at this in here. Right now we've got the plus. In here, we want to minus. We can hit that over there, or you can hit Alt. And if you take a look, you can see that go to a minus. And you can hold Alt down. And if you want to make the sample size smaller, hit the small bracket key. Or sorry, the bracket key on the left-hand side there. And it will hold Alt down. And you can feather that and fine tune it. Lift Alt and go over what you want to select. So I'm going to show you something here. You could You basically feather around it, but you see it's not perfect all of the time. Okay, I'm going to use this as an example right here. You could probably go back and forth with this quick selection tool, and I'm not going to go to this in depth, but I'm going to show you something where I know in the past I've been stuck here, like what do? I cannot get this little part here to get what I want, to mask or select what I want, and I don't want to start all over again, so what do I do? So there are other tools you can use to append and help get the mask that you want. So if this little quick selection tool doesn't work, my first thought is here, I want to basically do that little triangle, eliminate that little triangle. So how do I do that? So I'm going to go to the pen tool, and I am going to, where are we here? Make sure we got the right one, the pen tool. So I'm going to make a selection here. So what does that really mean? I've made a little selection right there. And what I want to do is subtract this from the rest of my selection. So I've done a little pen around there. I right mouse click and I go make selection. Look at the choices you have down here. If I make a new selection, I'm just going to select that. That's not what I want. But if I go make selection and I go subtract from selection, basically that's what that's going to do, is going to take whatever's in that selection that you've done there and subtract from your original masking, basically subtract from that original masking. Hit OK, watch that, look at that, it's subtracted. So that is your fine tuning for the mask. So I would generally go all the way around that, say I wanted to add in there. I'm still in the pen tool, click there. We're not killing our marching ants, we're not destroying it. And I'm being rough here, I'm not being, I could be a lot more. And I can go whatever in here, it doesn't really matter. And I will go make selection. So what do I want to do with this one? On this one up here, I subtracted to allow those marching ants to hug that corner there. But I want to add this one here. So I go add to selection. I hit OK. Look at that. It's done the marching ants around that. And you can go around the whole thing. I'm not going to bother for the sake of time. Look at all these around here. It's done it. This quick selection tool has done a pretty good job of going around there. I mean, let's just try this here. Anyway, so you would go around the whole image, and again, for time, we're going to be very, very, very rough here. So you do not want to just go, oops, okay, we have to, okay, look at that marching ants all the way out there. We don't want that. We don't want this part of the wall in there. So hit Alt, let's subtract that out of there. And that quick selection tool is pretty good at snapping to the edges of Chris and the wall. All right, without doing a lot of fine tuning, I think we've got a pretty good selection here. So you could hit Command J, and what that will do, it will copy our selection into a new layer. But we don't want to do that, so we're going to go Command or Control Z. I don't want to keep doing the Windows stuff. We want to refine that. We want to make it a little more palatable. So there's this tool up here called Refine Edge, and this is kind of the holy grail of masking. Other than channels, get a whole other tutorial. Look at the hard edge. If you put a background in there, you're going to see that white fringe. You're not going to want that. You've got to basically use these tools in here to make the outlines of this image as realistic as possible. One of the biggest and most powerful things of Refine Edge is Smart Radius, and it's the very first thing you want to go to. So as far as a method of operation when you use this Refine Edge, click Smart Radius. What that does is it will look at the edges of your masking, and I guess for lack of a better word, smart. It will look at the radius that you pick here and make smart calculations on what to pick. And you can see the slight changes, and really there's no formula. You've got to mess with these sliders. And I'll go through what I did for this image here. And I will hit Smart Radius, and I will hit, I don't know, about 12 pixels or whatever, and that's what will surround this masking. And the way to see what you've Smart Radiused, and that's a term, click this up there. Look at what I've chosen, and the higher the pixels, it will choose more. You don't necessarily want that much. You want to pick sort of something that makes sense, and that looks like it makes sense to me. Click J or that again, and you will go back to the image. There are a lot of different ways to look at it here. On black is one of the better ways to view what you're masking. White is another way. It depends on the contrast between your subject and the background. Black and white is just literally different ways to look at it, and there is no real great way to do it or perfect way to do it. It is totally up to you. There's overlay. I use that quite a bit. On layers is what it looks like with your masking, and the reveal is the original one. Marching ants I rarely use, but I use this one quite a bit, again, depending on what my image is. All right, so I'm going to zoom in a bit. Oops. My computer's being really slow here. It looks a little sharp. So what do I do? I've got a Smart Radius. I can play with that. Again, this is all fine-tuning. There is no real way to do this. You've got to play around with them, but the first thing you want to do is start with a Smart Radius. There's this, you know what? This is probably not the best tool to be describing in this. This is for hair, like fine strands of hair. So I'm not going to get into this one because we're doing a couple extra little things in this tutorial with some effects and stuff like that. So this is a little more in depth, and again covered in another tutorial, but let's just stick with this right now. So I want to smooth this edge. These ones down here are kind of fine tuning. There's no real strict rule. You just play with it, and you have to look at your edges and look at something that looks realistic. This is what you start out with. Hit Smart Radius. Look at the before. Let's finish thinking. And after, not much of a difference, because I think this wand tool has done a pretty good job of masking that out. But I like to hit smooth, and it will smooth that edge out a little bit. It will take a lot of like a highlighted chromatic aberration off of there. Feather it a tiny bit. Again, there's no real rule. It's how it looks to you and how it looks to the image. So you really have to just play around with it. Do not just hit OK. It is always a good idea to hit decontaminate colors. It will take any fringing color, especially if you've shot this against a green screen. It will eliminate any green around there. And what this also does is give you a drop-down menu to output to. And this will output to a new layer with layer mask, meaning you can edit it afterwards. You haven't done any permanent alterations to it. You can edit the mask afterwards, and I'll show you what it looks like. So I'm going to hit OK. So doesn't look much different, does it? Because we haven't really put it against anything in the background. Let's just add a new layer here, and we will fill that with white. Now you can see what we've done. That actually looks pretty good. So I am going to get rid of that, because the next step, and again, this tutorial is not strictly on masking. It's more of a process of what you do for compositing to get from this image to this image. I will cover masking in more detail in other tutorials. This is one way of masking. There's many ways of masking. This is to give you an idea and just to fuel the creative process into turning your image into something else. So, let's figure out what's in my group and what's not in my group. So let's actually get rid of these because I don't want these messing up our delete. All right. So let's turn all these off. So we have masked right here. This is the one I've done before, so I've already done it and I fine-tuned it. So we brought a background in. I found this on, I don't know, I was searching all sorts of stuff, like what can I put in the background, and you just kind of look for something cool. This has got a very yellowish sort of warm look to it. And Chris, after we had our mask, doesn't. Look at the difference. That looks awful. He's very cold. This is very warm. So what do? We have to match the colors. So we add a curves layer. Again, another whole tutorial how to do it. This is a process in turning one image into a composite image, and the process in what you and how to do it. We have to match the colors. We have to, or match the tones, or the color temperature, or the feel between the background and the foreground. Clearly, this image looks completely unreal. So, looking at it, we're missing some yellows. And there's a lot of yellows in the highlights, and there's no yellows in his highlights. So let's actually just show you the result, and I'm going to do it. So this is a curves layer, so we're going to add a curves layer. This button right down here is a clipping mask, which means that if you click it, oops, it was already on. That little arrow there means it will affect the layer below it, nothing else. So again, not a tutorial on curves, but what we want to do is introduce yellows into this image. How do we do yellows? This is kind of jumping ahead a little bit. Yellow is the opposite of blue, so we have to go down to blue. And this is more of a fictitious line of blues. If we drag the darks, watch, the blues will be introduced into the darks. If we drag it this way, yellows will be introduced in the darks, and because yellow is the opposite of blue. And this is lights, this is darks. So let's drag this back here. If we drag this down, we are introducing yellows into the highlights. You can see, watch his face. A lot of yellows. Let's go back up there. Let's drag this down here, watch the darks. We will introduce yellows into the darks. So what we have to do is eyeball it. And just basically drag these, no real formula, until it looks like it's more or less realistic. That could be a little bit too much yellows in the darks. Let's bring that back. Okay, so I like that. You can sit there and play with it for however long you want, however much time you have. But this is how you do it. This is how you match the foreground to the background to make it look more or less realistic. So let's see. Yeah, they both look pretty good. Let's just get rid of the one I did before. Oops. Okay. So what did I do with this image next? And this is where the creativity. You could just that image is good. Let's just leave it at that. But I've got a light source that apparently comes from up here down here, so I want to add a lens flare as a light source from up there. There's lots of ways to do it. There's a render lighting effect, so you've got to be an 8-bit there, but that's one way to do it. But I like to do a lens flare, and look at that. It looks like we got a light source up here. I like lens flare, and it just adds to the image. How do we do that? Let's turn that off. Let's create a new layer above. We hit right there. Okay, just if you like this, write it down, follow it, remember this. We want to turn this layer black. So you could go Edit, Fill, Black. There's shortcuts to do that, but let's just do that. We've killed the image. what you want to do is basically remember where the light source might have come from. It's up here somewhere. So let's hit that again. So we turned it all black. Filter, render, lens flare. Remember where that light source may have come from. It was round about here. You can play with these, whichever one you might like. I tend to like this one there. I'm going to hit OK. Now we basically got a black picture with a bunch of lens flares in there. You want to change the blending mode to screen. That will eliminate all the black in there and leave all the bright lens flare in there. What I don't like about this is there's different colors that do not complement the yellow in this image. It looks off in my opinion. If you like it, I've always, I teach classes and I've always said if someone doesn't like your image, you just say, screw you, it's art. But I don't like this. I could desaturate it, or I could do something called Colorize, and it will basically take all of this and colorize it into one color. If you go Command U, it will bring up the hue saturation, or you can just basically go Image Adjustments, Hue Saturation, but I like shortcuts. Hit this Colorize button right there and watch what happens to the colors in this lens flare. It turns them into one color. What do I want to do? I want to turn it into yellow because I want it to match. There we go. And I just drag this. I can turn it to red, purple, green, but I want it yellow because I want it all to be uniformed and match. I'll hit OK. And let's look at the difference between the two. And they look pretty similar enough. Anyway, so let's get rid of the one I did before. This could be the final image, but I wanted to color grade it. And what color grading is basically kind of like a split tone. And there's a specific formula that I have recently liked to use, which is introducing some blues into the darks and some yellows into the highlights to give it a bit of a fashion feel to it. So let's show you how to do that. This is very yellow, so let's add a curves. You do curves for color grading, so let's add a curves layer right there. And what did I say before? I wanted to introduce some blues into the black and some yellows into the highlights. And they are complementary colors, blue and yellow. Why? Because if we go to the blue channel, remember what I said before about the blues are up here and yellow is down here? They're complementary colors. So if I drag the darks up here, it's blue. If I drag the darks down here, they turn yellow. If I drag the highlights over here, it goes blue. Highlights down here, yellow. Okay, so I wanted some blues in the darks. So I go down here to the darks and I drag up. Watch the blues. You can go too far, which is ridiculous. So let's go down here. Really, there's no formula. It's just whatever you think looks good. So I'm going to drag the blues up. I'm going to introduce some yellow to the highlights. And that's it. Let's turn this off. And the one I did before, very similar. Delete that. And this is what we've done now. And that's pretty much it. I can mess around with it until, whatever I feel looks like a good picture. But this is pretty much what the process that I did to get to this picture. We have, let's turn all these off and we'll go over this again. We have cut him out. Oops. We've masked him out. And a whole other tutorial on how to do that, but this is how I did this particular one with the wand tool and some adding and subtracting from the pen layer. We have matched the color of Chris to the background with curves. We have had an effect of a lens flare with that little technique that I showed you, and we have color graded it to make it look, in my opinion, a little cooler. You can mess around this with the darks and the highlights and all different sort of ways, but let's just call this a finished image to go from Chris on a skateboard park or a skateboard ramp with drywall in the background to some image I found on the internet of a cool indoor rock building. Anyway, that's transformation. Hope you liked it. subscribe. I will be doing 1 or 2 videos a week on different subjects. Any questions, just give me a message on YouTube. Thanks, guys.